This story is called Red Gold, the curse of the dwarf's gold. The long winter was melting into spring, and Odin, Loki and lanky Honir were anxious to be off exploring. One morning, bright and early, 3 gods hiked across the rainbow bridge to Midgard. Honir's stride was so long the other 2 had almost a trot to keep up with him, but the weather was still a bit chilly and their cracking pace kept them warm. They found a river and decided to walk upstream. They covered many leagues and late in the afternoon came to a waterfall. They were hot and hungry, so to cool down they walked through the smoke that thundered and under a curtain of hurling water that sparkled in the sun. They were gazing, dripping and refreshed, into the seething cauldron at the foot of the fall when Odin spotted an otter on a nearby bank. The animal had caught a salmon and was resting beside its catch with its eyes closed, unaware of the god's presence. Odin pointed the otter out to Loki, who picked up a stone, took careful aim and hurled it with all his might. The stone blurred through the air and struck the otter on the head, killing it instantly. "How about that then?" crowed the shape-changer. 2 meals with 1 blow. He raided across and retrieved the otter and the salmon. The water cooled the trio. The meat and fish would take care of their hunger when they stopped for the night. They left the waterfall and continued up the valley. It was dusk when they saw a farmhouse ahead and smoke coming from its chimney. They approached the house and Odin knocked on the door. It was opened by the farmer, whose name was Hreidmar. "Any chance of a bed for the night?" asked the one-eyed god. Hreidmar peered at the trio. 3 of you? "Yes, but we can pay you in food." "How much food? Enough for my sons, my daughters?" "Oh, plenty. Show him, Loki." Loki held up the otter and the salmon. At the sight of the otter, the farmer seemed to flinch, but he stepped aside and indicated they should enter. As soon as the 3 were inside, Hreidmar turned and walked out of the room. "What's eating him?" asked Loki. Odin shrugged. "Who cares? We've a roof over our heads, that's all that matters." "I'm not so sure about that," muttered Honir, to nobody's surprise. Honir was famous for never being sure about anything. Hreidmar had gone to speak with his sons, Fafnir and Regin. "Your brother's dead," he said. "Who, Otter?" asked Fafnir. "How do you know?" "I've just been shown his body," grated Hreidmar. "By those who murdered him, they're staying the night here." Filled with rage, Fafnir and Regin swore to avenge their brother Otter. "There are 3 of them," warned Hreidmar. "There are 3 of us," retorted Fafnir. "Aye," the farmer, who was also a weaver of spells, nodded. "At my signal we'll tackle 1 each and I'll see if I can't magic them out of some of their powers." Hreidmar and his 2 remaining sons entered the room where the gods sat waiting, and they began to converse. The farmer gave the signal and the 3 of them leapt on Odin, Loki and Honir. Thanks to Hreidmar's magic, Odin lost his grip on his spear, and Loki's shoes fell off his feet. After a brief struggle, the 3 gods found themselves lying bound on the floor. Hreidmar, panting, glared down on them. "Otter was my son," he hissed, "and you killed him. Now I shall kill the 3 of you." "But he was just an otter," protested Odin. "By day he took the form of an otter," snarled Fafnir, "the better to catch the fish we need to eat. But by night he was a man, our brother." "I would have killed him if I'd known that," said Loki. "But how was I to know?" "Listen, Hreidmar," interrupted Odin. "It's obvious we didn't mean to kill your son. What if we pay you a ransom for his life? You can name the amount and we'll get it." The farmer gazed at Odin. "Will you swear an oath on that? I get whatever ransom I demand, or the 3 of you die?" "Certainly," said Odin. "Very well." Hreidmar turned to Fafnir. "Take Otter's body to your sisters, tell them to skin him, and bring the pelt to me." When the pelt came, Hreidmar showed it to his captives. "Right, I want this pelt crammed with red gold, and when it's full I want it covered with a heap of red gold so no part of it can be seen." "Agreed," said Odin. He turned and murmured some instructions to Loki. Loki nodded, then looked at the farmer. "Untie me," he said. "I'll fetch the gold, and while you hold my 2 friends hostage." Loki was freed. He strode to the door, chuckling at some private joke, and vanished into the night. Loki travelled to Midgard, none too swiftly because his sky shoes were back at Hreidmar's place. Reaching the island of Hlessi, he visited Aegir the sea god and his wife Ran in their hall on the seabed. There he borrowed Ran's drowning net and journeyed on till he reached a hole in the ground. He wriggled through this hole and went down, down, down till he came to a great echoing cavern with a pool of black water. In the water lay a gigantic pike. Loki cast Ran's net into the water and hauled out the snapping, wriggling pike. He grabbed the pike, shook it and hissed, "Change shape." At once the fish vanished and Loki found himself holding the dwarf and Vari. "What do you want?" screeched the dwarf. "All your red gold," snarled Loki, "or I'll break every bone in your ugly little body." All right, whined the dwarf. "Follow me." He led the god to the forge where he turned gold into beautiful objects. There were bars and coins and scraps and splashes of red gold everywhere. Sweep it all up, snapped Loki. Put it in these 2 sacks and get a move on. The dwarf was far from happy, but he daren't argue. Soon the forge was empty of gold, while the 2 sacks were full. Loki took one last look around to make sure, and his sharp eyes caught a glint on Andvari's finger. "What about that?" he growled, pointing to the ring. "It's just a ring," whimpered the dwarf. "A small ring. Let me keep it, please." "Hand it over," grated Loki. "Now." Reluctantly, Andvari took off the ring and gave it to Loki, who slipped it on his own finger. As Loki hefted the 2 sacks, the dwarf hissed, "I curse that ring and all my gold. Whoever comes to own it will be destroyed." "Good," grinned Loki, thinking of Hreidmar and his sons. "Nobody robs me and gets away with it," screeched the dwarf. "Splendid," smiled Loki. "I'll be sure and pass on your kind words." He threw a sack of gold over each shoulder and strode away through the network of caverns. "At last," growled Odin, "I thought you weren't coming back." Loki grinned. "Would I leave my friends here to die?" Honir gazed at him. "I don't know," he murmured. "You might." Hreidmar cut the captive's bonds, hardly able to tear his eyes away from the gold. Otter's pelt was fetched and filled to bursting with gold from the first sack. Then it was laid on the floor, and the second sack was emptied over it. Hreidmar examined the glittering heap minutely. "This won't do," he cried. "I can see a whisker. The deal's off. You're all going to die." "Just a minute." Loki twisted Andvari's ring from his finger. "Here, this'll hide the whisker." While Hreidmar and his sons gloated over the gold, Odin retrieved his great spear and Loki put on his sky shoes. Thus fortified, the 3 gods strode out of the house. In the doorway, Loki turned and said, "Oh, by the way, the ring and all that gold belonged to the dwarf Andvari. He put a curse on it. His exact words were, 'Whoever comes to own it will be destroyed.' I just thought I'd tell you." Hreidmar's cheeks paled and he glanced fearfully at the gold. When he looked up, Loki had gone. There was just his mocking laughter in the wind. The end.